Hey, what's up, y'all? It's poppin'. It's D. About to react to this bed by court cases. This is when corrupt cops find out they are getting a life sentence. Get them, get them, get them. Too many of them be getting off. Let's normalize sending them to jail for life. Period. Let's see what happens. Let's watch.
Robbery, drug dealing, and a web of lies to cover it all up.
Corruption on Baltimore Police's elite gun unit was breathtaking.
13 officers brought down.
One of the biggest corruption scandals.
A judge sentenced Sergeant Wayne Jenkins to 25 years.
The leader of the disgrace unit begged a judge for mercy.
Yeah, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Former Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Just who is Wayne Jenkins?
This case is a wild one. So wild that HBO Studios decided to make a 6-part series about it. An organized crime ring right inside the Baltimore Police Department. This case is...
I ain't gonna lie. I've thought about this when I would see, on like crime shows and whatnot, when they would do these drug busts and it would be like money everywhere. I would be like, if I was one of these cops, I would have to pocket a few, that has crossed my mind. I ain't gonna lie. And it seems like that's what he was doing.
Deep in crime.
But he probably was doing some other shit too.
With a total of 8 members involved, so our focus will be on the ringleader, Sergeant Wayne Jenkins.
Damn,
Jenkins was the leader of the Gun Trace Task Force, or GTTF, which was responsible for a number of underhanded crimes.
Jenkins admits to stealing prescription drugs that were originally looted from pharmacies during the riots.
I deserve 10 to 15 years, Jessica. I stole drugs. That's a dirty crime.
Wayne Jenkins ran his elite unit as a criminal gang.
Robbery, drugs, evidence planting, just to name a few. Not exactly what the mayor had in mind when creating this group.
At least 10 armed robberies, burglaries, $1 million in drug sales, the systematic looting of overtime in a city that can barely afford it.
Sergeant Jenkins not only stole drugs, money, and overtime, he also stole a father and a husband from a family.
And it dated from recent cases like this one caught on body camera to 2011, when Jenkins' crew tried to rob 2 men in a car, causing them to flee, hitting and killing Albert Davis.
His actions will leave a lifelong imprint on these poor people.
7 years later, we find out that corrupt cops
he was too corrupt,
who swore to protect and serve were nothing more than criminals.
One of the victim's daughters was asked if she could ever trust the police department after what transpired. Her answer was quick and completely understandable.
Do you trust the police department after what your family has been through?
No, sir. No, never.
I understand.
We're not sure we would either. But the question still remains. How did years of organized crime in a police force finally get taken down? Inadvertently, one man was responsible.
A judge sentenced heroin dealer Antoine Washington for his role in a deadly drug ring. He sold the heroin that killed a teenager from Bel Air.
The files say that while wiretaps were being recorded, the voices of these 8 badge policemen turned mobsters were heard frequently throughout.
Police were investigating a string of suburban overdoses. They set up a wiretap. They soon found out that Baltimore City police officers were part of the drug trade.
Now that's not normal.
The investigation into that overdose led the feds directly to the Gun Trace Task Force, a corrupt unit of Baltimore City cops.
Upon further inspection, the FBI found that nothing relating to this group of officers was in fact normal.
Disgraced Detective Mamadou
Gardner
protecting the drug crew, enabling their business to flourish into a multi-million-dollar operation.
On top of the recordings, they also discovered a number of official complaints and irregularities against these officers.
Further details illuminating the depth of corruption by Jenkins and company that today's plea proves goes back at least as far as 2010.
Sadly for Jenkins and his team, the FBI now had themselves an abundance of evidence that would ultimately lead to arrests.
That was my choice, Jessica. Go to trial and get life. Life in prison with 3 small children.
Jenkins was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, where he was heard to have wept during his sentencing. begging the judge for mercy.
Has now pleaded guilty for his role in the robbery, extortion, and fraud ring while leading the elite Baltimore Police Department gun unit.
9 counts total in 2 different indictments. Racketeering, robbery, altering records, and depriving the freedom and liberty of 2 men by planting evidence in a case that sent them to prison.
His family had little to say regarding his sentencing. His lawyer, however, did have a few words on his behalf.
Mr. Jenkins is extremely remorseful.
We don't care.
He's been remorseful for a long time, even before these charges were brought.
And Jenkins himself does seem to show signs of remorse.
When asked by Judge Blake if the former sergeant had anything else to say before accepting his guilty plea, he said, quote, "No, ma'am, I am ashamed of myself."
Should Jenkins really be forgiven? We're not so sure. It's easy to show remorse when you've been caught.
Exactly.
Something tells us that he wouldn't have stopped so quickly had the FBI not been hot on his tail.
He wouldn't have stopped at all. What? This man was living a life.
London police officer has been sentenced to life in prison for the kidnap, rape and murder of a young woman.
She was
This happened
caring,
just last year?
she was funny, she was clever.
On the evening of March the 3rd, 2021, PC Wayne Couzens was waiting.
It's clear, isn't it, that the only reason he was here was to abduct a woman.
Wayne Couzens pretended to arrest Sarah Everard and used his police handcuffs to kidnap her.
In her last hours, she was faced with brutality and terror, alone with someone intent on doing her harm.
Oh my God.
A police officer and now a self-confessed sex killer.
This case is the definition of cruelty.
Wow.
A true example of abuse of power, and a case which happened just 19 months ago. This was a crime which was weeks in the making. On the evening of March 3rd, 2021, 33-year-old Sarah Everard was walking home from her friend's house just outside of Brixton Hill. While walking down the A25, she was then stopped by a man who this case is focused on. Police Constable Wayne Couzens. The details that are about to follow regarding the next 96 hours in this case will chill you to your core.
Witnesses saw this, the moment of the calculated kidnap. They believed Wayne Couzens was an officer doing his job. Couzens then drove to a remote rural area where he raped and murdered Sarah Everard. He's later seen on CCTV, calmly continuing with daily life.
In the rural area of Ashford, it is believed that Couzens raped and then strangled Sarah just 100 yards from his woodland cottage using his police-issued belt, literally taking the law into his own hands. Couzens just left the body there in the woods whilst he drove to Kent where he disposed of her phone. On March 5th, he then filled a petrol tank with fuel and burned her body inside of a refrigerator. On March 7th, he bought 2 contractor builder bags, which he used to conceal the burnt body before disposing of her remains into a nearby pond. If your stomach isn't sick enough yet, this twisted individual had more secrets to share. Details that shed a light on Couzens, his manipulative nature, and his pure desperation as he's locked in handcuffs. Here is the body cam recording of Couzens being questioned by police in his own residence.
Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you know where Sarah is?
No. Sat in handcuffs and what I know her. So you must have something to say that I know her.
Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, no. I don't know if my family's going to do us still, but they threatened to take my family away from me.
What?
You can hear Couzens claim that a local gang had approached him, threatened him, and requested that a girl be delivered to an unknown location in exchange for his family's safety. Yet we know this not to be true. And so did the police.
Officers found Sarah's body 50 miles away, in remote woodland in Kent. It was hidden in a builder's bag. Analysis of his mobile phone showed he'd been in the woods where Sarah was found.
These horrific details posed the question, was this really the one and only time Couzens had committed an act this dark? Well, these despicable acts were fresh in the judge's mind at sentencing when he had this to say.
You have irretrievably damaged the lives of Sarah Everard's family and friends. You have very considerably added to the sense of insecurity that many have living in our cities, perhaps particularly women. when travelling by themselves, and especially at night.
Even his old boss could not disguise her disdain at his actions and the tarnishing of the Metropolitan Police Force.
I absolutely know that there are those who feel their trust in us is shaken. I recognise that for some people a precious bond of trust has been damaged. I am so sorry.
But the real pain can be heard in the words of Sarah's family, the people who will be scarred by this heinous act for the rest of their lives.
Wayne Couzens held a position of trust as a police officer, and we are outraged and sickened that he abused this trust in order to lure Sarah to her death. The world is a safer place with him imprisoned.
This case had some backlash that was felt nationwide in the UK. It turns out Couzens had received an indecent exposure complaint earlier that week, and that the MET police force may have been able to prevent Sarah's death.
Sarah's death sparked nationwide protests and vigils. For his crimes, Wayne Couzens has been told he'll never be released from
He needs to
prison.
get the death penalty. Bitch.
Thankfully,
Bald-head
Couzens
bitch.
won't ever be able to repeat these acts, as he has no possibility of parole, with a whole life sentence.
Other news, a Miami-Dade police officer is facing some serious charges today after his arrest.
Miami-Dade police lieutenant under arrest tonight. The allegations very disturbing.
This next case again pushes the boundaries of some of the horrific things that are being done behind the badge.
A Miami-Dade police lieutenant under arrest for molesting a child.
You know, guys, really disturbing details surrounding this case.
He is accused of molesting a girl.
Molestation. This is a hard story to highlight, but when it's a person that society sees as a protector, that's ultimately the predator, we need to shed light on the atrocities and betrayal. In 2018, 47-year-old Braulio Gonzalez was arrested on multiple counts of molestation on a then 8-year-old child.
This is a mugshot of Miami-Dade Police
Fucking
Lieutenant
disgusting.
Braulio Gonzalez, a veteran member
In
of the
Florida.
Miami-Dade Police Department SWAT team.
The crime started in 2011 and continued for 2 whole years until 2013 when the girl turned 10.
The lieutenant abused a female, according to
maybe
documents,
she
over a period
came
of 2
forward
years, and at
later
one time held a gun at her head.
There's very little information about the victim because of her age, so we will refer to her as Jane Smith. Jane told police that she was scared for her life, and this was the reason she didn't come forward sooner.
Well, this lieutenant was booked a little after 5 o'clock this afternoon. According to documents, this abuse happened several years ago. Here's
How the
a story.
fuck he get in
He would
contact
then,
with?
over the next couple of years, touch her body in every inappropriate way that you can think of. Truly sickening. So how was this child molester finally apprehended? What brought forward into the light his awful crimes that he'd hidden for years?
This little girl told a psychiatrist on September 5th about the alleged abuse that took place between 2011 and 2013.
And Jane would tell her therapist about the situation, which ultimately started the investigation that put this monster away. And in May of 2022, that's exactly what happened.
Tonight, life in prison. That is the sentence handed down to a former Miami-Dade police officer convicted of molesting several girls. 2 of the victims spoke about what happened to them. Gonzalez was arrested in 2018 after a victim told a psychologist he fondled her several times when she was between 8 and 10 years old.
So at this time, based on the jury's findings,
How do you have access to her? Is he like a neighbor or something?
count 1 will be a 10-year minimum mandatory. Counts 2 through 9 will have a 25-year minimum mandatory. Everything will run concurrent.
Gonzalez is now serving his time behind bars, so the children of the Miami-Dade area no longer need to check under their beds at night, with one less monster free to roam.
Electric chair!
George Floyd, an African-American man who died in police custody.
The incident was caught on camera, and we must warn you the images
All these are
disturbing.
pretty recent.
Overnight, nationwide unrest.
Curfew goes into effect at 11 p.m. Eastern Time.
You can see police here now firing tear gas into the crowd.
Large groups torch police cruisers.
But we do want justice, and we want equality.
No, did they kill him, bro?
This was a heinous act. An act that exposed a badge-bearing criminal who not only committed a murder in broad daylight, but an act of heartlessness so dark that it shocked the people of Milwaukee and around the globe. This is the murder of George Floyd. On May 25th, 2020, former officer Derek Chauvin was the third to arrive to a call that accused George Floyd of using a counterfeit $20 bill. George resisted being thrown into the cop car due to a claim that he was claustrophobic. Chauvin then removed him from the other side of the vehicle, and this is where it becomes hard to watch.
What do you want? I can breathe.
Chauvin held this position for over 8 minutes before the paramedics arrived. We can even see an off-duty paramedic telling Chauvin to remove his knee and get off his neck. George Floyd was pronounced dead at the hands of law enforcement. 9:25 p.m. May 25th, 2020. The moment the world changed. The moment tragedy resulted in the globe standing united against racism and inequality. Many protests occupied the streets of America, Canada, and across the globe as a result of George Floyd's death.
Demonstrations across the country grow.
Something has to be done.
People were outraged, social movements were created, and Chauvin was made to take responsibility for his actions, where other guilty officers had not before him. After weeks of testimonies in a long and vigorous trial, the verdict was in.
Sentence for count one. The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. It's 270. Based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition for the remainder of your life.
You'll see little to no emotion is shown by Chauvin throughout his sentencing. Much like during the 8 minutes he had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, cutting off oxygen to his lungs. Derek Chauvin, George Floyd. Two names that will be written into history for eternity. Chauvin for his deadly abuse of power. Floyd for his tragic, untimely death. A death that highlighted the need to do better as a society and the need to hold everyone accountable for their actions, especially those who have power and influence, those that swore an oath to serve and protect.
The movement won't rest until we get justice.
I don't know why this feel like this is more recent, like this year. Is it just me? Why do I feel like this happened this year? I was like, oh yeah, this was recent. This happened like earlier this year. This happened like 2 years ago. But then he was prosecuted last year. Why am I feeling like this was all this year? These past couple years has been a fucking blur. I'm sure the pandemic has a lot to do with that, but it's wild. Fuck all these people. They got what they deserve. This is trifling as hell. Y'all let me know what y'all thought. Let me know what other videos you want me to watch, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.